Hey guys, Dustin Witt.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder.
This is Paul Dini.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
You're listening to Bat Force Radio.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and you're listening to Bat Force Radio, so stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to Bat Force Radio. I'm Robin Cross in Canada, and we've got Dunk joining us from work today.
What up?
And ahead of this episode, I did a little look into this, and I believe we have done 12 episodes dedicated to the White Knight universe, going back to the first time that Sean Murphy joined us on the show. And that very first episode was posted May 9th, 2018. And now here we are 5 years later to the day, seeing the release of issue 1 of Generation Joker, the 5th overall volume of the White Knight Universe series. Returning to the show to help us talk about it are the co-writers of the series. She is known for comics work like Cherish and White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, and he is known for comics work like Bloody Hell and White Knight Presents Red Hood. Welcome back, Katana Collins and Clay McCormack, and thanks for joining us again.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Coming up on release date. Very excited.
Yes. Imminent.
Sure is.
And
it always gets pretty nerve-wracking on those days as it's coming. Do you get nervous, Clay?
You know, I thought that I would, but it's so the fact that we get our comps like a week before, it kind of takes the edge off because I almost forget that it's going to happen. Because I already have the books in hand, and the marketing department probably doesn't want to hear me say that. But yeah, it's not too bad. I the first couple days are always a little bit, antsy because you want to have to decide whether or not you want to see how people enjoyed the book or not.
Does the antsiness go down a little with the following issues of the series as one where the most apprehension maybe comes in?
How do you feel, Katana? Because my wide release experience is only really limited to Red Hood, which is only 2 issues. So I haven't experienced 6 issues of discourse.
Yeah, I think issue 1 is definitely up there in terms of the nerve factor. And I think after that, it's sort of levels out a little bit for me until there's always 1 or 2 inevitable issues within the run that you've done something that you're like,
oh, you mean where you kill the dog?
Yes. I know, I'm sorry. But yeah, so that issue for me during Harley, I was like, oh no.
That's when you should be in business.
Yeah. And then for me, the last issue is also makes me just as nervous because it's the moment where it's like, well, did we really do our jobs here and wrap it all up in a nice bow for everyone?
Yeah, that's the culmination. And did we stick the landing?
Right.
Yeah. So you in particular, now you have rehearsals tonight and tomorrow for a stage play, and then over the weekend you're in the air to be joining Sean on this signing and convention tour that he just began, correct?
That is correct. Yes, I will be over the Atlantic come Sunday.
Cool. And then speaking of travel, both of you have been doing some cons over the past couple of years. So I want to jump into something different than we usually talk about, like some best and worst con moments. Is there anything that stands out as being a great memory or a particularly terrible one?
Oh, man. Clay, you've been doing cons longer than me.
Well, I was going to say last year, what year is this? 2023? 2022, I went to San Diego for the first time in 15 years. The last time I went was 2006, I think. And it was quite a difference because I went then as someone who was just, I wasn't even a professional. It was right out of college, and so I was just kind of walking the floor and overwhelmed by everything. So to go back as an actual professional was quite a different experience, and I got to meet a bunch of the Bat Force guys, which was a lot of fun, and yeah, it was a great experience.
And any not so great? Well, that arguably the last part of that was could fit into the worst experiences.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to specify that there's a split. Yes.
Yeah.
I went to my first San Diego. Was it last year, Clay? I think
Yeah.
it was last summer.
Yeah.
I'd never been to San Diego Comic-Con, so that was exciting and that was very fun. But kind of, I mean, the most exciting part of that weekend actually for me had nothing to do with comics. Clay, Sean, and I were having breakfast in, I forget the area of San Diego that it's called, but as we were like sitting there eating, I looked across the street and there was this sign for the Whaley House, which is like one of the most haunted
That's right.
houses in all of America. And my excitement could not be contained. I legitimately considered not going to the signing that day and just going into the Whaley House on a tour because I really wanted to see it. But yeah, that was like a pinnacle for me, and it had nothing to do with comics.
That's the tough part, isn't it? When you go abroad somewhere for a convention, it's always kind of like, well, I could actually do something fun outside the convention, but I have to be here for 12 hours a day. So
the problem is I'm really a lazy human, and if I had just taken 10 minutes before we left for San Diego and like Googled what was around to do, I probably would have been like, oh, the Whaley House. I should schedule a time to do that. And I could have found time had I like really planned it out. And I'm sure that there were other comic people and creators there who would have loved to come with me to that.
Absolutely.
I know. So like, it's just, I don't think to do that before. And like, here I am about to leave for Paris. And like, I have half of a day when I arrive while Sean is still signing and doing stuff that I'm like, I should probably look into what's near the hotel and what I can just do on my own for that half a day. And I haven't. And I won't.
Luckily Paris isn't much of a tourist city, so you should be all right.
It's true. I mean, whatever. I'll just go to the hotel, order some room service.
Yeah. Get a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
A Royale with cheese.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
yeah.
A Royale with cheese. Good reference.
So yeah, that's kind of the best part of traveling, whether it's for cons or cons are a great excuse for it, but yeah, it's a great opportunity to get to do anything in a place that you don't normally get the chance to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, do people still, is that a thing people do still? Is the Royale with cheese something did that pop off after Pulp Fiction? Is that something that the French hate us for now? Because everyone goes to France and goes to McDonald's and...
Well, I don't want to cast any aspersions, but I'm pretty sure France already hated America.
True. Yeah. I've heard things.
They only hate us slightly less in Canada here, I'm sure. So I won't brag. So we're okay. So I'm trying to simultaneously. There we go. So Generation Joker.
There it is. 6
issues written by the two of you. Art by Mirka Andolfo, of course, creator of Sweet Paprika, Unnatural, etc. Colored by Alejandro Sanchez. How did Mirka come into the picture? She also did some cover work for Cherish, and we're at this point now where we keep seeing new names coming into the series. How did Mirka come into the radar?
I believe Sean found her, right?
I think so. We've been asked this a couple times, and it's been so long that this process has been going that I'm afraid I'm getting all these questions wrong and maybe even answering them differently every time they're asked. So like people are going to be like, no, Katana said, and it's going to be like, she said something different literally every time someone asked her. But yeah, I think Sean found her at found her. I think he was like introduced to her art at Emerald City one year, and really liked what he saw, and just we kind of sat down and had a chat with her, and she was so lovely and wonderful, and I think that's kind of where the discussion began to have her work on some White Knight stuff. And I really connected with Mirka. And so when I got the Cherish gig and we were looking for cover artists, she was one of the names I tossed out, as was Clay. Clay did one of our covers too.
Oh, I did. Thank you.
Yeah. And then when she was doing she did the anthology for Sweet Paprika, and then she asked me to write a short for that. So like she and I feel like have just been sort of weaving in and out of each other's comic worlds for a year or so now.
Yeah, and I wasn't. I unfortunately was not familiar with her work when Sean brought her up, and once I saw it, I was like, yeah, she's excellent. Be great to work with her, and I think she had been on Sean's radar for a while. I think that when he had first started coming up with these spin-off possibilities, I know that when he and I had talked about it, her name was always one of the ones that was kicking around as someone he'd like to work with. So it's great that we made it happen.
Yeah, her art style works very well within the feel of this universe. You know, without looking like Sean's, we've seen everyone who's been brought in to do art on any series has really had everything has meshed well.
Yeah. And she also, you know, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday. She has a great style that has a certain innocence built into it that works really well for a story like this that's told primarily through the eyes of two kids.
Yeah. That like childlike wonderment she really captures.
Yeah.
And now we see people like Dan Mora and Dan Panosian are providing cover art on this series. You know, basically be named Dan and improve your chances of getting into the White Knight universe. People are clearly happy to get involved with the White Knight universe. It's cool to see how it's become this this thing that has been so successful and so well received that other creators are really happy to get a part of that.
Yeah, I needed to get in on it myself, and so hope I can happily say, I think I can say this, I'm actually doing one of the covers for issue number 5.
Oh, nice. I don't think I've been able to see that one yet.
Can't wait to see it.
Well, you haven't seen it because I haven't drawn it yet, so I'll let you know how
So that
I wasn't about to call you out like that, but
you heard it here first. He hasn't drawn it yet.
Yeah, we've got a lot of really, really incredible talent contributing in so many different ways, from everything from like the colorists to the variant cover artists, and obviously, as we said, Mirka and Alejandro. It's a great team.
Our colorist Alejandro is fantastic. Like he's been doing something where his colors look like watercolors. And it's just when we got the proof for the second issue in, and I was going through, and I was like, "This is gorgeous." I don't know if I've ever seen colors like this really anywhere. So he's doing great work, and I'm pretty jealous actually.
Yeah, it seems like Alejandro is the colorist on about 50% of the big titles that come out each month.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so ignorant of so many names of the great people who are working, and I'm happy to know him now because he's very, very good.
And as well known as Mirka is for her own creations like Sweet Paprika, etc., she does have some legacy in the Batman universe as well. She was the artist on the issue of Teen Titans during the Metal event.
Really?
She drew the first issue, the issue that was the first appearance of the Batman Who Laughs.
No kidding.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
And she also did, I think, issue 1 of the Punchline series.
Yeah. Maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's dabbled in the DC universe a bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, she did some great redesigns for us in this series too. I think in issue 1 you get a couple of them. Neo Joker returns, and she got to redesign her in this really cool evolution, because it's been like a decade in universe since that character's been around, and so she's evolved a bit, and she has a new take on Poison Ivy that's really great. And it's one of those things where when you see the first one, you kind of go, well, how many of these can we get her to redesign? Because these are really cool. But you don't want to just keep throwing stuff at her, because she's actually got to do the pages.
Yeah, I got to see the issue digitally a while back, but as we're speaking right now, I have the physical copy in my hand, and seeing her work there is really good. So yeah, we get the return of Neo Joker and then Ivy back as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Generation Joker, we're seeing the focus put on Jackie and Bryce. Now, Bryce in particular, this is the first real focus on him, as he was more in the back seat in the Beyond the White Knight series, compared to Jackie's level of involvement in that story.
Yeah, more the trunk.
Yeah, there you go.
Poor Bryce.
The trunk of the jokes.
I think he was like mentioned once. I think it was just like issue 8.
Yeah, he kind of just pops up and goes like this.
I completely forgot about him. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's right.
Hey guys, remember me, the good kid?
Honestly, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we had this like running joke as we were sort of crafting Generation Joker, where we would just sort of say like, and Bryce was also there. But we worked really hard to make. I mean, we didn't have to work that hard, but like we were very conscious of him being his own human in this story, and not just being an extension of Jackie.
Yeah. And I, what you said about him being kind of left behind, honestly, as you'll see in the first issue, that's kind of a big part of the story, is that he was left behind, and he's in a certain headspace, given that the rest of his family is off doing crazy Batman related things, and he was stuck at home, I guess,
like
watching
dog sitting. Yeah.
Doing
so we really wanted to kind of give him a fair shake in this, and I would say he drives a decent amount of the action through the series,
For sure.
So this feels like the idea was always there to tell their story. Was that the case? And how has the team handled really fleshing out these two new characters and finding a place for them to really exist within the world that already existed around them?
Yeah, I do think pretty much from the onset of at least the Harley book, the idea or the seed of an idea to have the twins have their own spin-off of some sort kind of was always like, at least in the background of discussions. And for me, I've talked about this before too, where I felt like the twins were such a big part of the Harley story that I feel very protective of them, and maybe even a little possessive of them. Like they're my twins, where I'm like, they're mine. Be careful. Like let's be safe with them. And I have very strong opinions on ways to handle their arcs and their autonomy.
Yeah, I knew I was doing my job if I suggested something that should happen to them, and Colleen started to get a little nervous about it. And it's like, okay, now we're pushing the edge of putting these kids into danger. I think we're in the right area.
Clay likes to watch me squirm.
Well, I think you got a little bit desensitized when you had to, previously, go through that experience of removing one of the hyenas from
the babies.
Existence. Yeah,
I know. And then it was, I really wanted not one of the only hyena, Lucy, to be along for the ride. And she gets a nice little cameo in issue 1, but she's not on the adventure this time. I think everyone was like, no more hyenas, Katana. We know what you do with them.
So, at the time that we're putting this episode out into the wild, issue 1 is also out in the wild, so we can really go ahead and not
Yeah.
worry about
Okay.
spoilers. So,
Get into
Don't
it.
be precious.
yeah, let's get right in. So we see the focus not only on the kids, but this guy right here. They're going on a trip with Dad, aren't they?
hmm
Gosh, look how handsome he looks. He looks so debonair.
You'd
I
never
always-
guess he was a mass murderer.
Or a
I've always
hologram.
been more
Or a
of like
hologram,
an
yeah.
old man Bruce. Like old man Bruce makes my heart flutter, but I don't know. Look at that. Look at that suit.
He's sharp.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mirka did him good.
and he's in great shape.
Yeah.
But for the benefit of everyone listening, how would you explain the story that we are seeing here in issue 1?
Well, the pitch I got from Sean when he came up with the core concept was essentially the Joker in an attempt to, or I should say, Jack Napier in an attempt to bond with his kids, steals a Batmobile and takes them on a road trip to different important places from his past to kind of teach them that he's more than what they think he is.
Yeah, some parts it doesn't seem like he's doing a very good job convincing.
No, and I mean that's I think one of the things that we tapped into as we kind of broke the story down was, what are they learning and how are they learning it when they're going to these places? Because Jack just saying, okay, here's the place I met your mom. Okay, here's the place I grew up. There's like, that's not the most engaging way to handle that stuff. And so Jack kind of sets the ball rolling on this road trip, but then it very quickly gets out of control. And the kids end up sort of by happenstance and just by the action of the series going to all these different places that are important to Jack, just maybe not the way he would have shown it to them. And so they're actually getting a really, they're getting quite an education on who their dad was.
Yeah. And I mean, really, Jack's never been a father. Like he's never, this is the first time he's ever had to be a dad to anyone. And I think, I not that he necessarily thought it would be breezy, but I do think that there's a level to this that he was like, oh, it's going to be fine. We're going to go on a little road trip. It's great. I got this. And probably like a lot of parents feel where they're like, oh, I don't got this. I feel like that's sort of the tone, at least for issue 1. Like, this is going to be fun. And then it's like, oh God, what did I do?
And he's also, it's really the first time he's ever really had to care about anybody other than himself. It's sort of the curse that comes with being given a conscience, I guess, by having the Jack Napier personality come back, is now he's in charge of these 2 kids that he may be an immortal digital ghost, maybe not so immortal, but that doesn't mean people can't get to him through his kids. And so it sort of activates this level of concern and freaks him out a bit in a way that he wasn't really prepared for.
Yeah, and I think that there's like on a very subtle level, kind of what we explore in that character development is, yes, he loves Harley. Harley is probably the only other person in the world that he has felt that emotion for. But I think anyone who's a parent can also understand and speak to that feeling of when your child is brought into your life, it's a love that you've never felt before.
Now, with the focus mostly being on Jack/Joker as a father, as a parent, we do also see some of Harley and where she is currently at as a parent as well. How would you describe how Harley has been fielding this very complicated situation she's been living in?
Poor Harley. Poor girl. Can't catch a break.
So that all the history with the who the father of her children is, his not well, as far as she knows, he's no longer in the picture. But then there's also the other part of that triangle is Bruce and his level of involvement with the family, that the relationship between them. It's a pretty complex situation.
I feel like this whole series should have had a framing device where it's just Harley talking about all this stuff at a therapy meeting or something, because it is
Maybe on Dr. Phil.
or maybe maybe the series ends with she makes her own digital hologram so she can have a therapist she can talk to.
Like on Jerry Springer, the ticker tape at the bottom is like, my dead husband comes back as hologram and kidnaps my children. What do I do? Harley is, I think I'm not a parent, but I have enough nieces and nephews and friends who are, that I've sort of watched this, how like that state of overwhelm is like this constant roller coaster ride. Like you sometimes have everything under control, and then with a flip of a switch, nothing's under control. And Harley's personality is chaos, like a fun chaos. And I think that she, in this story, very much embodies that. And they're also in this, the kids are now in this tumultuous time of like that angsty pre-teenage year of that, like, even if she did have this parenting thing down when they were like kids and kind of like playful and fun and easier, now it's like, oh my gosh, hormones are everywhere. And so I think in Beyond and this, we kind of see that chaos, but also protective mama bear come out, where, I mean, these are her children, and she's not going to let just anyone handle making sure they're safe. Like, that's her job.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to make sure came through with Harley is that throughout the White Knight series, she's been relatively level-headed for the most part, except for a handful of outbursts. And I wanted to make sure that in this situation where her children are in danger, some of that begins to crack a little bit. And so you get to see some of the classic Harley Quinn energy come out, whether it's dealing with an FBI agent she doesn't like, or any other impediments that get in her way. She's there's always a chance she's going to snap and grab you by the collar and want to slap some sense into you.
Yeah, I like you describing that as the Harley energy. Maybe we can call it big Harley energy, coming out when the children are threatened. And one of the other things that we see as a result of the kids going on this road trip with Pops, the other characters that come into the story. So we touch on a bit of where Bruce left off from the end of Beyond the White Knight. We get a glimpse of where he is now, what he's dealing with, and we also see Diana. And so Bruce is being typical Bruce here, knowing that Harley knows him well enough to pick up on it. He's kind of speaking to her in code right in front of Diana, while looking like he's playing ball.
Yeah, I think when we brought Diana and the FBI into the equation, we kind of had to figure out what role they were really going to play. And in these sort of stories, there's one of the things that was stuck in my mind as we were developing this as sort of inspiration was Thelma and Louise. And I kept coming back to the Harvey Keitel character in Thelma and Louise, who's the cop who's chasing them, who is an antagonist but not a villain. And so that was the kind of line we tried to walk with the FBI, where Diana has her own set of goals that she wants that may not line up with Harley, but she's not malicious. She doesn't have an evil mindset or a negative mindset. She's just trying to do her job. And to Harley and to Bruce, what they see is the FBI thinking that it's going to be a breeze to deal with the digital immortal spirit of the greatest criminal mind in the history of Gotham City. So they kind of realize they're going to need to take things into their own hands to really deal with this. And how do they start that ball rolling without tipping off the FBI as to what they're going to do?
And that's an interesting complication into having to not only deal with Joker, but having to do so while tiptoeing around the awareness of the FBI.
Yeah, there's a certain level of we wanted to make it feel like the net was really wide, and then as the story goes on, the net starts to close in and get tighter and tighter around them.
So acting on Bruce's very subtle cues here, Harley sets off to go save her babies, but first we get a little cameo as she has to call over some babysitters, doesn't she?
Yes, that was something that I fought for pretty hard.
Yeah, it's a great inclusion.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to see if we could get them in there, and I figured I think we had talked about that page as this joke shot where she's like, okay, she's gonna there's one thing I got to do left, call for backup, and you're thinking, oh great, who's she bringing in for this? And it's just she's getting a babysitter. And I was just thinking, who's the most unlikely character in this universe that you would call to watch your dogs? And of course, it's Jason Todd and Gan.
And Gan, yeah, it was very cool to see Gan back.
I mean, I also think Catwoman would have been a very funny cameo if she had ever been in the White universe before. But yes, having Catwoman dog sit, not a good idea.
And if it weren't for the whole COVID thing throwing a wrench in plans, maybe we would have seen some Catwoman in the White Knight universe by now.
Who knows? Who knows? Maybe
there's still time.
There's still time. Yeah,
plenty of time.
And now this brings us, Harley heads out to find the kids, but the first people she finds are, as we said, she runs into Neo, Joker, and Ivy. Very cool to see both of them popping back up in the story. Was the plan always there to involve them?
Yes.
It was, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because they were sort of cameoed in the Harley story as well. So I think it was pretty natural to want to include them, and especially with Neo, who's not really had a big involvement in the White Knight universe in a long time. It felt like it was past due to give her growth and her arc in this universe.
Yeah, I think she might be my favorite part of the series because we I think across the original volume of White Knight and the Harley Quinn miniseries and this, we kind of get this nice sort of 3-act structure character arc for her, which is nice because she is such a compelling character that hadn't up to this point really gotten a lot to do after the first volume. So it was nice to come back to her, and yeah, I'm excited to see how people react to where we take her.
Yeah.
Now, in his effort to show the children his past, where he comes from, what he really was, that history turns out to be a danger to all of them. What is it that they are faced with here as we come towards the end of the first issue already?
Well, we had one of the first things we had talked about when we were breaking this story open was, okay, where would Jack take them? What are the things that he wants them to see? And I think one of the first ideas was, he should take them to show where he met Harley, because she's the most important thing in his life. Obviously, she's their mother. So that's something that would be on the list. And as we got to kicking it around, we're like, well, what is this place? They met at this club, or it was like a burlesque club kind of place?
Yeah.
Yep. And we were thinking that was in universe like 35 years ago or something. And so what does that look like? How has it changed? And when Jack gets there, do we want it to be exactly the way it was before, or do we want it to have gone under some sort of a change that would shake him? Because as he's trying to impart this history, he finds that this history is starting to disappear. And so, yeah, it's a puppet show theater now.
But not, well, it could be argued that puppets in general are creepy, but this particular one is a really creepy and really cool inclusion into the story, the encounter that they have here. And we find that this is, keeping the idea of the generations colliding. This is now a next generation of the ventriloquist.
Yeah, I think I think this was one of the first things that I brought to the table when we were kicking this around. And when I explained the idea, when I showed up and I was like, okay, what if it's the ventriloquist's daughter and she has an army of killer puppets run by killer puppeteers? I saw Sean's face kind of turn a certain way where it looked like he was thinking, I made a huge mistake
in befriending this guy.
Well, I don't. What was your reaction to that idea when we started kicking it around, Katana?
I have very limited knowledge of the ventriloquist, so I feel like it took me a really long time to even understand what was happening. Like, I think at one point, as I got the pages for that scene from Clay, it and let's keep in mind, in my defense, I'm also very dyslexic. and as I was reading, I was just like, I thought this universe wasn't like super magical. Like, how are these puppets attacking? And it didn't occur to me that they all had humans attached to them. I just thought like she had puppets walking around. I don't know. Once I saw it come together, I was like, okay, I get it. This makes perfect sense now. But in the interim, I was like, wait, they find well, that's a spoiler. I can't say that. Anyway, anyway, but I thought it was really fun. And when we were also kicking around the idea of like he should take the kids to this club where he met their mother. And we were like, oh, but that can't, like, he can't just walk in with 2 kids to this like burlesque club.
Yeah, nightclub.
Like, that's not gonna. It can't be a club anymore if they go in to see it. And I don't even think we debated any other ideas. It was the puppet show was pretty much it from the get-go, right? It was like,
I think so. Yeah.
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 So even if mine and Sean's faces were like this, we didn't argue. We were just like, okay.
Yeah, I think I pitched it as ventriloquist is the head of a murderous version of Avenue Q, and I think that kind of clicked. It's like, okay, all right, sure. And
you bring up a musical, and I'm in.
Yeah, see, that's
like,
I knew I'd catch
He knows his audience.
That way. And also what was nice about that sequence at the end of the first issue, because it's, you kind of, there's a lot of balls to get rolling, even though the series is relatively simple, and then it's, they're on a road trip and they got to get these kids before X, Y, and Z happens. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so taking that final scene to sort of slow down for a second and reestablish what some of the stakes are, I thought was pretty helpful. And the idea of getting into the Joker's past and some of the sins that he committed, specifically surrounding what happens at Arkham Asylum in Curse of the White Knight, I thought, well, the puppet show thing would be a really fun way to kind of recap that without having to do like a flashback and just talk through it. We could do it through a puppet show. And so you get to see this big evil Azrael puppet murdering puppet Two-Face and puppet Penguin and all this kind of stuff. And so I thought it would just be a fun way to kind of at the end of the issue kind of set up, okay, here's the stakes, here's what's going on. This is how the kids are in peril, and this is how Jack might have screwed up.
And
as a sidebar, God damn it, Sean. Like that Azrael slaughter has
Yeah.
just time and time again has come back to bite us in the ass every time we try to write a spinoff. I'm like, there is no one left, man.
I think we can say without really spoiling anything though, we've found a way around it. So
Yeah, I feel like we have done very well considering the like sliver of like alleyways he's left us to get around it.
Okay, confirmed. Issue 2 of Generation Joker, we see Bane got his head put back on.
don't tell anybody.
It's okay. Nobody listens to this.
Yeah.
But one of the things that made the original ventriloquist a little more of an enigma to readers and watchers of different things over the years. In some stories, he was just a crazy guy who had a regular puppet that he believed was alive. But then you had other stories where Scarface actually was alive, and the one that was calling the shots. So when we come to this scene here, it takes on it would fit into a horror movie, this bit at the end here. All these puppets showing up, and yeah, you've got the puppet versions of all of these villains, but the puppet show being run by this character, the daughter of the ventriloquist, who to her, the opposite, like, everyone is the hero of their own story. To her story, her father is the hero, and these bad hero guys were actually the villains. So we're seeing it from her point of view, that she's angry at all of these people, and Joker obviously. And
Yeah. We don't unfortunately have too much time to really get into her as a character. But I think it brings up a lot of questions. Like, did she just have these puppets ready to go, or it's has she been stewing on this for years and years, and finally the opportunity presented itself? I don't know. I mean, she's or does she just run an above board puppet theater, and then the Joker happens to waltz in, and she's like, all right, how quickly can I put a very intricate puppet show together?
I like to imagine her, in her crazy compulsive, just sitting there maybe in the basement of the theater, just stitching together all of these dolls in her her plot for revenge. But I want to have one of those little scarecrow puppets. That guy looks really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would think as a little girl who did love dolls and puppets, I would imagine that it's probably how she and her dad connected when he was around, right? Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
He probably made her all kinds of dolls and puppets. And
yeah, as twisted as it is, you have to think that if she grew up with her father in her life, then she also grew up with Scarface in her life, being treated like a person,
like an uncle or something. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely explains why she's as bonkers as she is.
Yeah, I think there's, it's funny. It's one of those characters where when we started writing it, we thought like, okay, yeah, this is cool thematically, it works, it's a fun bit at the end of the story, and it's a nice new little wrinkle for the story. But yeah, I think there's a lot you could do with her if you wanted to. As just talking about her right now, I think there's you could probably get an entire issue or so out of what her deal is, and make her even a viable villain for the future. But unfortunately, that does not happen in the series.
Doesn't happen in our book.
We don't have room for that, unfortunately. But.
Or like, imagine like when you're like a child psychologist, they use like puppets and dolls a lot to be like, how do you feel? Like, is that how she processed her feelings with her father?
Yeah. Once we start doing spin-offs of the spin-offs.
Jenny gets her own.
Yes.
Yeah, we can get to see her putting together this merry band of puppeteers.
Sounds like a really solid one-shot.
What White Knight, One Bad Day, Jenny Wex.
Jenny. I just like White Knight
Joker's
Jenny.
Daughter. White Knight Jenny.
Speaking of
just like a kind of cover. Yeah.
Speaking of
Here
one
she
bad
is.
day, you had put out that April Fool's joke with the
Mhm.
Condiment Man one. That was
Mhm.
funny. The number of people that that bit was pretty fun to see.
Yeah, it was mission accomplished, I would say, on my end, because I had this idea that I had worked into another thing that, well, I won't go into that, but of this way to revamp the Condiment King and make him simultaneously less of a joke and more of a joke at the same time. And the One Bad Day series seemed like such a great place to do that. And I had reached out to one of the editors, and she had told me that at the time, as of right now, they're not planning on doing any more of them. And so I was like, well, what can I do? Is there any reason why I couldn't do this as a joke? Because I know that those books were coming out, and I knew I could, being someone who actively works in comics, I could pull off a cover that looked at least semi-realistic. And yeah, I was curious to see how much people would bite, and a lot of people did, and I was happy to see that.
Well, you mocked up the previews page for it, and it
Yeah,
looked so
that was the
legitimate.
secret. Yeah, that was doing the previous page was the cherry on top, I think.
Meanwhile, I'm over here like, Clay, where are the pages for issue 3?
I'm
That did
barking.
not happen. That did not happen.
That's why issue 5 has so many condiment related puns in it, because I was just in the wrong headspace.
Yeah, it's just in a mindset.
Come on, Bryce, catch up.
Exactly. Yes.
Mhm.
So people have, presumably everyone listening right now has issue 1 in their hands or on their screen if they're reading digitally. They're in this far. What
Yeah,
can?
there we
Yes.
go.
Oh yeah, you got the nice foil.
I got
one.
the foil one. It's
Yeah,
actually
I like
horrible
that.
in this lighting, though.
So, presumably they're on board so far with issue 1. What should they expect? Why should they keep coming back for the rest of the series? What are we going to see here, without obviously spoiling? But what's the expectation here?
Well, we have rent to pay, so if they could do us a solid, that would be great. But what do you think, Katana?
I would say that at least in the next couple of issues, there's like a lot of action, and like that's not something I'm known for, but I think we both did a really good job at naturally having these hijinks crop up. And most importantly, I think that the entire run of this book has so much heart. Like there's quite a bit of depth for something that was originally just kind of pitched as like, what if Joker had like a Knight Rider feel? Like originally that was sort of the like, woo, kind of like party time, fun mini-series pitch. But I think Clay and I and Sean really took that idea, and very true to form with all of Sean's books, right? Like we just kept digging and kept digging and kept digging into these characters. And as we've talked about, Clay is really good at torturing. Like throwing the worst scenarios and like just torture your characters so that we can break them down and get that vulnerability and have them rise from the ash.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the things that I've been the most happy about in how we managed to spin things is how to, even though Jack's original plan goes off the rails, how we still manage to bring the kids to all these different places that are important to the Joker and to Jack and to his history, just maybe not in the way that Jack would have liked to bring them there. And in doing so, instead of it just sort of being a trip down memory lane for Jack, it ends up being a story about, not only is it about the kids learning about their father, but it's about Jack actually, possibly for the first time, wrestling and dealing with the consequences of his actions for things that he did when he was alive. And as we started breaking it down, there was just so many different little bits that came out that were so fascinating for all these different characters. Like, I don't know if when we started this, we expected Neo Joker to be someone who goes through as much of a change as she does. And I think people are gonna enjoy where the story goes and how we get there, because the places they go are going to be familiar, but it's not going to be exactly how they were left at the end of the last series.
Well, you mentioned Joker confronting the results of his past, and right at the end of issue 1, we're seeing how the results of the life he lived is right off the bat in issue 1, putting his children's lives at risk here. And so that's kind of the first slap in the face for him, maybe, that I did this.
Yeah. And like, I can't remember. Do you remember, Clay? Is this in issue 1? Do they have the conversation with him where they're like, "You don't deserve the title of dad"?
Oh, that sounds familiar. I think that.
Yeah,
might be
I think that's this issue where like he says something along the lines of like, "I'm your father," and they're like, "No, actually, like you've not been present ever." And like, it's not just these the historicity in visiting these places that's putting him through the ringer, but like, I think he just sort of expected to come back and be welcomed with open arms by these 2 kids. And there's a lot of reality that he's having to face.
Yeah, absolutely.
So surprises for sure to come. We saw glimpses of other characters. I presume, you alluded to, we're going to see an evolution of Neo Joker here, so we're sure to see also more Ivy. Do we expect to see more involvement of Bruce throughout the series? Should people think they're going to see him?
Yeah, Bruce, you're not going to really know what Bruce's role in the story is until it comes together at the end. Like we touch in with him every issue, but it's not exactly clear what he's doing. But as the story goes on, you'll see what he's up to.
That sounds like he's Batmaning.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Always in the
often the case. Yeah,
He
you
just
don't
can't
know.
help himself.
Nope.
Yeah.
He just can't help himself from Batmaning.
And I glossed right over this. Right in the beginning of this issue, we have a new Batmobile.
Oh yeah,
it's not a White Knight book without some Batmobile in it.
It's like a stealth mobile.
Yeah,
looks like a normal car, because that was something we also kind of struggled with in the original concept of this, which is like, if 2 kids steal a Batmobile, you'll find them like that. Like,
right.
It's a Batmobile, like, you know where it is. So we kind of had to have Mirka create and design this Batmobile that doesn't look like a Batmobile from the outside, because otherwise all you have to do is put a chopper in the air and you'd find those kids.
Yeah, and we had to do a little bit of narrative backflipping to figure out, like, okay, well, if it's a Batmobile, then why can't Bruce just track it? Okay, there's got to be a reason for that. So maybe it's got some untrackable thing in it. And
Jack being able to like tap into any electronic system is very helpful for that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and when you do a story like this, when there's so much stuff going on, you kind of have to decide how large you want your circle to be as far as what you're going to deal with. And I think one of the things that we actually talked about a decent amount was, what do we do about the cops? Because the FBI is in this. Do we also want GCPD involved? And I think we were like, I think we just need to assume that the cops are doing something else, because it would just be too much to try and work in the GTO or something and all
like,
this
as much as
stuff.
I love Montoya and I would have loved to have Montoya on this team, like that was something we definitely talked about, because in my story Montoya becomes like an aunt to the kids. So it did feel like, of course she would be looking for them, but there's just not enough space to do it all. And we even got extra pages on this first issue and there wasn't enough space.
Right.
So the GCPD are just currently wrapped up with all of the villains who are no longer alive in Gotham.
Yes.
They're dealing with the aftermath of Powers, probably.
Yes. That's true. This is
right after.
Week?
It's like
I think it's a week
1 week.
after the events of Batman of White Knight Beyond.
That's
So
correct.
theoretically, they're tied
They're
up
tied
doing
up.
other stuff with
And
insurance
that
claims or something.
and that vacuum that was created with the absence of all the villains. That's sort of a perfect opportunity for this, now Neo Gotham world. The Batman Beyond sort of future that we're in. It's this space for other villains to take their place.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Generation Joker's off to a great start, but you both do other things as well. Colleen, Cherish wrapped up a little while ago. Do you have anything else coming that you can talk about?
Not anything in comics, I don't think. But I have some rom-coms coming out, some romance novels. There is that Sweet Paprika anthology that I'm in that just came out, a few weeks ago, I think. So keep an eye out for those.
And Clay, yourself, do we know any more yet on maybe that other follow-up to Bloody Hell? I'm going to keep bugging you about that.
Follow-up to Bloody Hell, probably not. I would say that's a TBD. It's something that it's like whenever I have downtime, I'm like, all right, maybe I'll do this next, and then something else comes up and kind of pushes it around. I'm in the middle of writing another comic that I don't really think I can talk about yet. But I'm very excited. It's something I've wanted to do for 5 years or so. I'm working with a good friend of mine, Ricardo Lopez Ortiz, is going to be drawing it. And if you know anything about either of us, you can probably put the pieces together of what this is going to be about. So I'll leave it at that. And I think that's it for the moment for me. I'm always on the verge of doing something else on my own, whether it's like a Kickstarter or I've been threatening to start a Patreon or something, but nothing hard at the moment, just my various podcast appearances.
Now that
I didn't know you didn't have a Patreon. I just assumed you did for the podcast.
The podcast does. The podcast is a Patreon, but I had been debating.
Okay.
Yeah, I had been thinking about doing another book just myself that I would write and draw and publish independently. And I had thought about maybe I wanted to do something that didn't have as hard a timeline on it, something I could kind of work on between stuff. And I thought, oh, maybe if I do a Patreon, then I can that'll keep me honest about working on it and give me a little bit of cash to keep going. So we'll see if that ever happens. But
I love my Patreon. It is the most fun. Like, it's actually where I will just say the things that I'm not supposed to announce on Twitter, or I'm not on Twitter, but on Instagram. Like, it's where I'm like, bleh, like, here's what I'm doing. And like,
I'll have to pick your brain about that.
Yeah. And like, I was showing like the sneak peeks of Generation Joker art, and like they knew about Generation Joker before anybody else did, on my Patreon. So yeah, I think it's really fun. It's like one of my favorite ways to interact with readers and fans right now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, the book that you said you can't say much about yet, is this a DC thing or elsewhere?
Elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's all I can really say. But
okay. Fair enough. Any con appearances or anything currently planned where people will be able to find you, Clay?
I will be at AwesomeCon in Washington, D.C. in June. And I'm hoping I'll be at Boston Fan Expo in August. There's a small indie show in Boston that I love called Mice that I believe I'll be at, and that's late September, I think. And still waiting to hear on New York, but hopefully I'll be in New York again.
Cool.
God, you're busy.
And Katana, you're about to hit the road. Where will people be able to find you in the coming weeks?
Around France. I don't remember the name. I know at Paris and Nice are two of the cities I know we'll be at. We will be in Milan and Lake Como for anyone going to that Lake Como Arts Fest. Because I'm doing this show right now, I had to sort of back off of doing conventions and appearances and signings. That's why I wasn't able to be at Wicked Comic-Con whenever that was, a week or two ago. And I that's why I'm not going to be in DC. I'm not going to San Diego because I'm in the show. So really the next comic convention I think for me is out. Oh wait, I don't think it's announced yet.
Well, can you talk about?
If it's what I think it is,
It
Sean
is.
has been telling people, or at
He
least
has.
online, that he'll be there. Yeah.
Okay, so Fargo. I'll be in Fargo.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the show that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing a musical called Sweet Charity. I'm playing Charity, and it is a very dance-heavy show. It's for anyone who knows musicals, like the movie version with Shirley MacLaine was directed and choreographed by Bob Fosse. So it's very, very Fosse, like kind of funky movements and like yes,
Jazz
hands.
hands.
And like actually Bob Fosse is known for like very weird shapes and like isolations and stuff in dance. Like there's a lot of like weird like just your shoulder moves and but it's a very intense show. It's like a workhorse of a show. So I'm gonna be dancing my little butt off for the next few months.
Cool.
And I will be performing a one-man version of Jesus Christ Superstar
in the shower.
In my living room until my girlfriend threatens to leave.
I would love to hear the soundtrack. You can send me the vinyl.
My Jesus is good. My Jesus is good. My Judas is great.
I was about to say I'd love to see that, and then I was like, wait, he said shower. That is very inappropriate. I should not say. Luckily, I know your girlfriend very well.
Now, I obviously from everything we're talking about, you've both got a lot on your plates recently. But anything that you guys have been enjoying in the way of movies, television, anything like that? What are you watching? What should people check out?
Do you have anything off the top of your head, Katana?
I just started watching, and oh god, what is the name of it? I think it's on Apple TV with Adam Scott.
Oh, Severance.
Severance. Yeah.
Severance. I just started Severance. I'm like a few episodes in. Sean was not as into it as I was, so like I'm kind of watching it on my own because he's just was like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Whatever.
great.
He wasn't
great
into
show.
it. I was into it. He was not.
Great show.
And I just keep hearing like, oh my god, this season finale. So like I'm very excited to just get to the fucking season finale already and see what everyone's talking about.
I just started watching that new HBO series Love and Death, which is pretty interesting with Elizabeth Olsen. It's a pretty slow burn, but it's pretty fun. She's very engaging, and Jesse Plemons is really good. The thing I've been watching a lot of is actually Deadwood.
Oh yeah, I love Deadwood.
I do a podcast, the Penske podcast, which is a Star Trek podcast, and my co-host Wes, or I'm his co-host technically, but he's a huge Deadwood fan, and so we recently just started a Deadwood podcast called Something Pretty. And so I had seen maybe a season and a quarter of Deadwood back in the day, but I had never watched it all the way through, and I loved it. And so we're going through the whole thing right now, and we are, not to plug all the shows that we do, but the Star Trek podcast we do, we're currently in season 3 of Voyager, I think, and we just finished also doing the newest season of Star Trek Picard. And they're fine, but it's not exactly high art, you know? And when you go from a middling episode of Star Trek Voyager to an episode of Deadwood, it's just like a breath of fresh air because of the high level of execution and talent on display in Deadwood. It's an amazing show.
I secretly love Voyager.
Oh, yeah?
I'm enjoying it.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Are you? It doesn't sound like
yeah, you know, it's great. It's great.
I love watching W. Earl Brown in Deadwood. He was Bill in the Last of Us video game, and
really?
Love seeing him. Yeah, and that was really interesting. It's cool watching him in things because like his character in The Last of Us, because they did mocap. It was all motion capture, so his character looks just like him. So it's very cool watching him in live action things. But have either of you checked out Yellowjackets?
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have seen the first season. I haven't seen any of the second season, but that was great. Katana, I think you would
Okay.
probably. I think you would. Would you like Yellowjackets? Yellowjackets is kind of like Lord of the Flies if it was a girls' soccer team, and it takes place. It takes place in the '90s, the early '90s, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Interesting.
it splits between, it's sort of like, Lord of the Flies, like, Lost kind of thing where they're stranded and, things are going down. But then we also see at the same time, they're showing us the present day versions of these characters and the results of everything that they went through
That's interesting.
when they were
and
younger.
the present day versions are played by Juliette Lewis and Christina Ricci and Melanie Linsky, and it's really
nice.
really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I also started watching, again, like me and title names. I don't know what's wrong with my brain that I can't remember them. But what was that? The show with like the ghost hunters on, I think it was on Netflix, British, and it's like kind of this post-apocalyptic world, but it's not an apocalypse. It's like ghosts are invading.
I don't know that one.
What? I don't have my
don't know
phone on
that
me to
either.
Google it. Really?
Is this a dream that you had?
It's a fever dream.
Just
Is it
invented
Netflix?
this show.
Shit. No, I don't.
Is it new?
No, it's fairly new. Like probably in the last 6 to 8 months. Ghost hunting show. There's so many ghost hunting shows. This is not going to yield anything. I'm trying to Google it. Netflix fiction British. Guys, your listeners have just tuned out. Lockwood and Company.
Oh, okay. I've
Lockwood
heard
and
the
Co.
name, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
It's
I'll have to
very
check that out.
fun. It's
You
really
gotta add
fun.
that to the list.
Yes, I did a terrible job selling that, but British ghost hunters. I don't know.
That was a fun game of Mad Libs we just played, though.
I can't believe that Google search came up with it. Like literally, did you hear that nonsensical ghost hunting show Netflix fiction British is what I put in. Oh my God. You guys, I think I need a nap.
Oh, man. I have to ask because it's my favorite. Did either of you see The Last of Us?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh. I don't like the way you said that. Don't be talking about my daddy Pedro that way. Don't do him dirty.
Okay. I watched 3 episodes and I thought it was good. And I really liked the Nick Offerman episode.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I'm just a little zombie apocalypse out at this point for me. And it's not to say I didn't think it was well done, and it just didn't grab me the way I was expecting it to, and so I never finished it.
Cool. Sounds like you liked it though, Katana.
I loved it,
Yeah.
and I mean, I started watching for Pedro,
Yeah,
and I kept watching because it was good. And I'm not a zombie apocalypse person. Maybe that's why I don't have this burnout. Like that is not a like a genre I tend to gravitate to.
Sure, yeah.
And so I thought I would hate it because I don't like scary things. And yeah, I enjoyed it. And like, again, I think I love things that have a lot of heart to them. And that show to me had, as we know from episode 3, it has like all the feels.
Definitely.
And
yeah.
Pedro.
And it has Pedro, like, let's be honest. Like I said,
He's really
that's what brought me in.
He's really cornering the market on loners who have to deal with upstart young children.
So we say, like, we call him the grumpy, reluctant father.
Mm-hmm.
He is really like, that is his jam. Like, he just needs to forever never play that part. In fact, I have some mugs that I made for my Patreon folks that it says, like, it's a quote from one of his interviews, and it says, "I'll be your cool slutty daddy," or something like that. And it has like an illustration of Pedro on it.
Did you see that clip from he was on the red carpet somewhere and someone came up to him and was like, "Would you read these thirst tweets?" And he looked at them and he was like, no, I'm sorry. And then he just kept like he finally hit a wall where he's like, I can't do this anymore.
I can't do this
I'm sorry."
anymore.
Too much.
Yes, I adore him. And I fear if I ever meet him at a convention, I'm just going to end with this because then we'll stop talking about Pedro. But I have this massive fear that if he's ever at a convention that Sean and I are at, I feel like Sean is going to just be like, by the way, my wife really loves you. She thinks you should be her cool slutty daddy. Like he's just gonna like word vomit all over
he would
him
so
for
do
me.
that.
I know. I'm like, don't do that. Play it cool. Don't tell him I drink out of a slutty daddy coffee mug every day.
I can see him doing that, saying all of that, and then just standing there smiling while you deal with the
Like,
outcome.
go talk. Yeah, he would 100% do that.
Oh, good times. That needs to
Yeah.
happen. Well, maybe we let you guys get back to everything you're still working on. You've both got schedules. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. Generation Joker issue 1 is out today as we're putting this episode out. Issue 2 coming up on June 20th, so check that one out as well. It's a lot of crazy stuff definitely coming up into this. Great start in issue 1. Thank you guys for being here again.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. And thanks again for accommodating my crazy schedule.
Our pleasure.
Send my apologies to everyone who couldn't be here or who was going to be here.
Yeah, fuck them kids. That was Katana Collins and Clay McCormack. And this was Bat Force Radio. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you.